Have you guys ever wondered, in economic life, why the prices for things and all stuff keep rising? Incomes and prices in the past were amazingly different from what they are today. Anyway, why am I talking about it all of a sudden? So, hi and Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Irdina and my speech today is beyond that because I am going to reveal about inflations and how it works. So to begin, I will divide my speech into three parts, which are: first, I will share the definition of inflation from economist perspective. Second, I will explain the causes of inflation and how it works. And third, I will reveal the differences between inflation and deflation. Before going to the main topic, we have to know first the definition of inflation. So without further ado, let's get to know about what inflation is. Inflation means that the general level of prices is going up. Means the opposite of deflation. Later, we will talk about deflation. Inflation means more money will need to be paid for goods like loaf of bread, rice, and so on, and services like getting a haircut at the hairdressers. Economists measure inflation regularly to know an economy's state. Inflation changes the ratio of money towards goods or services, which means more money is needed to get the same amount of a good or service, or the same amount of money will get a lower amount of good or services. Economists define certain customer baskets to be able to measure inflation. There can be positive and negative effects of inflation, but to remind, a rise of the price of a single good or service isn't considered inflation. Inflation only occurs with a general increase in the price level of goods and services throughout the economy. Do you guys know how to measure inflation? So here it is. The inflation rate is typically measured by changes in something called a price index. The most popular price index in the United States is the Consumer Price Index, in other words, CPI, which is a measure of the average change over time in the price of a standard set of consumer goods and services known as a market basket. CPI is calculated by dividing the price of a market basket in a particular year by the price of the basket in the base year. Then they will find the rate of inflation by calculating the percentage change in the CPI from one point in time to another. Now you know a little bit as much about inflation. So let's talk about the causes of inflation and how it works. How inflation works, guys? Based on what I read, inflation works when the total money in an economy increases too rapidly. The quality of the money, which means the currency value, often decreases. Economists generally think that the increased money supply causes the price of goods or services to increase over a longer period, but they disagree on causes over a shorter period. So what is the real causes of inflation? Let's check it out. Let's start with the first cause of inflation, which is demand pull inflation. What is this? The demand pull inflation theory can be said simply too much money chasing too few goods. In other words, if the will of buying goods is growing faster than the amount of goods that have been made, then prices will go up. This most likely happens in economies that are growing fast. Whenever a product is bought or sold beyond its real price for its worth, then inflation of money occurs. If a company, for example, makes a small amount of goods which are sold over high quantity, then it has to increase the prices so that it can manage the product quantity. So we will go to the second causes, which is cost push inflation. The cost push inflation theory says that when the cost of making goods which are paid by the company go up, they have to make prices higher to make profit out of selling that product. Means they want that profit, so that they make the prices higher than usual. The higher cost of making goods can include things like workers' wages, taxes to be paid to the government, or bigger costs of raw materials from other countries. However, Australian school economists think this is wrong, because if people have to pay high prices, this just means that they have less to spend on other things. To summarize, there are two main causes of inflation, which are first, demand pull inflation, and secondly, cost push inflation. You now know what the causes of inflation and how it happens, right? So let's continue by exploring how inflation can affect us and the differences between inflation and deflation. Generally, there are three differences between inflation and deflation. Firstly, inflation was marked by a general increase in the prices of goods and services. Meanwhile, deflation was marked by a general decrease in the prices of goods and services. Secondly, inflation was caused by demand pull or cost push inflations. Meanwhile, deflation was caused by contractions in the economy or the supply of money or credit. And thirdly, inflation is the decreases in purchasing power. Meanwhile, deflation means increases, is the opposite, increases in purchasing power. Whereas, inflation is associated with a general increase in the price of goods and services and a decrease in the value of money. So, the deflation means the opposite of it. Deflation refers to a general decrease in the price of goods and services and the increase in the value of money. If the percent change between CPI from one period to another is negative, you have deflation. The reverse is for inflation. A negative rate of inflation indicates deflation. Unlike inflation, which is typically caused by demand pull or cost push inflation, deflation is typically caused by contractions in the economy or the supply of money or credit. As a consequence, consumers may buy more with a unit of currency, whereas inflation generally forces people to buy less if their wages have not kept up with inflation. But deflation can have a similarly negative impact on customers, on consumers, and the economy as inflation. For example, it's often associated with less demand for goods and services, which can force firms to take cost-cutting measures that can increase the unemployment rate. Now, you know that how inflation was different from the deflation, right? So, to conclude, you should now understand about inflations, as we have covered three things about it, which are first, I have tell you about the definition of inflation from economist perspective. Secondly, I also have told you guys about how inflation works and its causes. And thirdly, we have know about the differences between inflation and deflation. Before I end my speech, I want to share a beautiful quote from Julia Gillard, who is the first and only female Prime Minister in Australian history. She said, "Through hard work and education, we can deliver a strong economy and opportunity for all." So I guess that's all from me. Thank you for lending me your ears and spending your time. I end my speech with wallahu a'lam and wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a nice day everyone. Assalamualaikum.